Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the IRCGN, the Central Ballistics Lab of the French Gendarmerie, by their gracious invitation, and we're taking a look at a very cool, very rare, sort of late pattern of the FAMAS rifle. This is a FAMAS G1. Now, the original military pattern of the FAMAS was the F1, so going from F1 to G1, this is the next series or next iteration. And you may be thinking, I've seen this full hand trigger guard, that's the FAMAS G2. Well, the G2 is the Navy pattern. It was adopted by the French Navy. This is the one that came in the middle, and the reason it exists is that the FAMAS F1 was a very expensive rifle to manufacture. So the French Army adopted it, and they didn't have a problem with the cost, in large part because it was a French government arsenal that developed and manufactured it. It was the French Army that was buying it. It's the same government. The cost isn't that big of a deal. And they wanted specifically a domestic manufactured rifle and all the benefits that go with having your own production in-house. So not a problem for the French Army, but when it came to trying to get foreign export sales of the FAMAS, the gun was just too expensive and nobody was buying it. So by 1990, the theory was, let's come up with an economized, stripped-down version of the FAMAS. We can retain the same basic mechanics, the lever-delayed blowback system, the bullpup design. We can keep all of the really expensive molded components. So the buttstock, the carry handle. This is a simplification, actually, of the original FAMAS lower assembly. We can keep all that, like we already have the mold tooling paid for to do those, but let's take off as much stuff as we can and try to get the price down. And in fact, the FAMAS G1 was 40% cheaper than the F1, as long as you were willing to purchase 1 to 200,000 of them. So this was introduced in 1990, and the hope was this will be the popular export model. So they made a bunch of samples, demonstration guns, deactivated guns, sample guns, and all of the frills that were taken off were still available as options if you wanted them. So this particular one actually has about probably a little more than half of those things put back on it as options. But let's go ahead and take a closer look, and let me show you what they offered to take off of the FAMAS G1 to make it a less expensive gun. All right, here's our G1, and then for comparison's sake, I do also have an F1 here that we will use as a comparator for some of the features. Now, to begin with, we have markings here on the receiver, pretty much the same as the earlier pattern, FAMAS 556, but G1 instead of F1. This is from the SP prefix range, serial number range, and it's serial number 8, so it's one of the very first ones. And that's it for markings, nothing else on there. Now, the areas that this was simplified, first off, we'll start right here because this is the most obvious piece. Instead of having a pistol grip and separate trigger guard, they just molded a full hand trigger guard into the polymer that makes up this complete lower component. Now, the reason they did that is on the original FAMAS, you had a trigger guard here that you could rotate out of the way to shoot with gloves on. And there's a lot of components in here. You've got this plate, you've got this trigger guard, you've got a number of bolts in there. This is a non-trivial assembly to manufacture. And if you're looking to trim any excess cost, well, if you get rid of all these small metal parts and just replace them with one molded in feature, that is both a lot less labor for assembly and a few francs less, a few euros less for manufacturing cost. The trigger's the same, the safety is the same, so this is full auto, it's actually semi-auto right there with the 1. Safe is flipped backward where it blocks the trigger, and full auto is on this side with the F. All right, now other features that you could have removed to minimize the cost. One of them was the burst mechanism. So on the FAMAS, you have your selector switch up here that allows you to swap between semi and full. But when you're in full auto mode, you can actually swap this lever to go between unlimited regular full auto and 3-round burst. That's another expensive bit of part. expensive bit of machinery, and if you don't particularly need 3 round bursts, well, you leave that out and get rid of the lever, and that was a simplification. Again, on this particular rifle, a bunch of these features have been put back on as available options. Next up, the bipod legs were removed. Again, they've been put back on here as an option, but if you didn't want the bipod, you can leave the bipod off. You'll notice one change that they made to the carry handle plastic here is the addition of a slot on either side. On the original FAMAS F1, we don't have that. The reason for those slots is that on the original FAMAS, and on this, if you have the bipod on it, the sling actually clips onto this lug on the bipod leg. Since there was the option of not having the bipod, you needed somewhere to attach the front sling component, so that would be this slot. And then you still have the original sling bars on the back. Worth pointing out here that the G1 also had a slightly different pattern of butt plate to it. So this is the F1 on the left, that's the G1 on the right. And that was your standard pattern for all the G1s. Normally, the F1 had a grenade sight out here. You can see it right there. It's got 2 positions for different types of rifle grenades. And of course, you've got these grooves on the barrel and this adjustable lug for adjusting range of rifle grenades. Well, all of that hardware was also removed from the G1. So you can see here the barrel is smooth. They still have this lug because it also serves as the back end to mounting a bayonet if you want that. But this is no longer movable. The grenade rings are gone. The grenade sight itself is gone. All of that stuff can go. And if you wanted rifle grenades, well, you could order this with all of those components as well. But the economy model gets rid of it. The original FAMAS includes a slide-up night sight on the front. That's definitely a candidate for simplification, and it is gone. So what you see here with this piece of sheet metal is how the front sight on the FAMAS is zeroed. That screw right there pushes the front sight side to side. So that's your zeroing, which is normally hidden underneath the front night sight. Now, this particular one has a scope mount added to it, which is kind of going the opposite direction from simplification. But again, this is a sample gun to show options available to those who might want them. It's got a Schmidt & Bender 4x25, pretty typical late Cold War sort of optic for a designated marksman's rifle. That's a really cool addition here, although the idea of the G1 would definitely not really include optics mounting on the guns. And that pretty well covers it for features of the G1 FAMAS. The magazine here is still the original FAMAS 25-round magazine. The barrels have a 1 in 12 twist for use only with early 55 grain ammunition. The mechanics remain exactly the same as the regular FAMAS. Left pin, pull out the bolt, the levered delay system right there, and regular FAMAS receiver. In total, there were about 1,600 of these manufactured, as best I can tell. I'm going on data from Zhang Yuan and his book on the FAMAS there. The vast majority of these were in the SP serial number range, like this one. This is a very early one, but they went up to about 1,500 apparently, and those consisted of demo guns, deactivated samples, that sort of thing for marketing, and a way to use get the production line set up and figured out, and what do you do with all the parts that you make while the production line's tooling up? Well, you make some sample guns and some deactivated ones. There was also an SR serial number range and an A serial number range. Not sure exactly what those specifically were. If we're going to look at typical, well, if we compare this to the F1 FAMAS, the SP series is the commercial export versions that they would sell to militaries or to private individuals. With the F1, the guns were available early enough that there were places in Europe, like Switzerland, where you could buy a full auto rifle as a private individual. Those are SP guns. The A prefix, again, if we look to the FAMAS F1, that would be a military serial number range. According to Zhang Yuan, production of these guys is like less than 50 of the SRs and less than 100 of the A prefix, the vast majority being SP. Anyway, a little bit of a tangent there. Ultimately, nobody ended up buying the G1 either. So the F1 really had almost no export sales. The G1 had literally no export sales. The problem was this was introduced in 1990, right about the same time that GIAT, the French conglomerate that by this point was the Saint-Étienne factory, was now owned by the industrial conglomerate GIAT. GIAT merged with Fabrique Nationale, FN, in Belgium in 1990, and the FN products at the time, if you wanted a 5.56 modern infantry combat rifle, FN's products were more profitable and more economical than GIAT's. And so this was basically squashed because the new combined ownership didn't want to compete with itself. This was not the profitable, the viable model to offer. FN's products were. So this ended up well, almost went nowhere. However, where we do see this coming back, specifically, you see that full hand pistol grip handguard down there, that would come back in 1994 as the FAMAS G2, which is the pattern manufactured for the French Navy, which looks kind of like this. They put all the frills back on it, and the big distinguishing factor about the G2 is that it actually uses Stanag magazines, so regular AR type magazines with a 1 in, I believe it was 1 in 7 twist barrel to be able to use 55 grain as well as 62 grain NATO ammunition. Anyway, I have a whole separate video on the FAMAS G2. I will link to that in the description text below, but I wanted to take this chance to pull out a G1, which you very, very rarely see, and show it to you guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Big thanks to the French Gendarmerie Nationale for giving me access to this guy to film. Thanks for watching.